He thought his boy had no future. Every test he took, he failed miserably. They said the child was hopeless, just a disappointment waiting to happen. Maybe you're taking care of children whose parents never notice your efforts, or cleaning up while the house is quiet. Tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? I promise today's story will touch your heart. My name is Margaret, and I've spent 43 years of my life caring for other people's children. My hands are weathered now, marked by years of washing tiny clothes, braiding hair, and wiping away tears that weren't shed by my own blood. But this story, this one cuts deeper than all the rest. It's about a boy named Aaron, a millionaire's son who everyone had given up on, and how I discovered brilliance hiding in plain sight while his own father counted stock dividends instead of counting blessings. I remember the first morning I walked up those marble steps on East 73rd Street in Manhattan. The Whitman mansion rose like a monument to success, all limestone and wrought iron, windows that caught the morning light like diamonds. Richard Whitman had made his fortune investing in the stock market, his wealth growing exponentially through Bitcoin and cryptocurrency investments that most people couldn't even pronounce. The man had assets worth more than some small countries, but as I would learn, all that money couldn't buy him the one thing his 8-year-old son needed most, someone who believed in him. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman answered the door that September morning, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 7 in the morning, her designer dress probably costing more than I made in 6 months. She looked me up and down with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to hiring help, her gaze lingering on my sensible shoes and modest cardigan. "You must be Margaret," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone wealthy people use when addressing the staff. Polite but distant, warm but not quite reaching the eyes. "Yes, ma'am. I'm here about the nanny position." She led me through halls lined with oil paintings and Persian rugs, past a living room where a crystal chandelier hung like frozen sunlight above furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. The house smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers, everything pristine and perfect and somehow empty. We passed a study where I glimpsed Richard Whitman behind a mahogany desk, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders about market positions and portfolio diversification. He didn't look up as we walked by. "Aaron is challenging," Eleanor said as we climbed a curved staircase. "He's had 3 nannies in the past 2 years. Bright enough, I suppose, but he simply cannot focus. His test scores are abysmal. The teachers at his private school have suggested he might need special placement." She paused, her hand resting on the banister. "We're hoping someone with your experience might help him reach his potential." I found Aaron in what they called the playroom, though it looked more like a small museum. Shelves lined with educational toys that had clearly never been touched, books arranged by color rather than content, a computer setup that could have run a small business. The boy sat on the floor in the center of it all, 8 years old and small for his age, dark hair falling into eyes that held a sadness I recognized immediately. He was building something with blocks, not the expensive learning blocks from the shelves, but regular wooden blocks he must have found somewhere, creating what looked like a sprawling city, complete with bridges and tunnels. "Aaron?" Eleanor said, her voice taking on that forced brightness adults use with children. "This is Margaret. She's going to be taking care of you." The boy looked up at me, and I saw intelligence flickering in those dark eyes, not the vacant stare of a slow child, but the careful assessment of someone who'd learned to be wary of adults. He didn't speak, just watched me with the kind of stillness that breaks your heart. I knelt down beside his creation, ignoring the expensive Persian rug beneath my knees. "This is beautiful," I said, and I meant it. The city he'd built wasn't random. There was planning in it, symmetry, even artistic vision. "Tell me about it." For a moment, Aaron said nothing. Then, so quietly, I almost missed it. "It's where people would be happy." That's when I knew. This wasn't a slow child or a problem child. This was a lonely child, a boy whose brilliance had been overlooked because it didn't fit into the neat categories his parents' world demanded. Eleanor was already checking her watch, mentioning a charity luncheon she couldn't miss, leaving me alone with Aaron and instructions about his schedule, his medications for focus, his tutor who came twice a week to help with the schoolwork he couldn't seem to master. After she left, Aaron and I sat together in that too-perfect playroom. "Can I tell you a secret?" I asked him, and he nodded solemnly. "I think you're much smarter than anyone realizes. Sometimes the smartest people see the world differently, and that can make school hard. But different isn't wrong. Different can be wonderful." It was the first time I saw him smile. Those early weeks taught me everything I needed to know about the Whitman family dynamics. Richard would leave for his Manhattan office before sunrise, returning after Aaron's bedtime with his phone still pressed to his ear, discussing profit margins and investment strategies. His wealth continued to grow, millions in stock portfolios, cryptocurrency holdings that fluctuated like digital weather, real estate investments across 3 continents, but he remained a stranger in his own home. When he did interact with Aaron, it was to quiz him on homework or express disappointment over test scores, his frustration evident when the boy couldn't perform to his standards. Eleanor filled her days with charity events and social obligations, serving on boards and attending galas where she could display the family's fortune like expensive jewelry. She loved Aaron in her way, I suppose, but it was a distracted love, the kind that gets expressed through expensive gifts rather than time. She would buy him the latest educational gadgets, sign him up for exclusive tutoring programs, enroll him in activities designed to stimulate cognitive development, all while missing the simple fact that her son was already brilliant, just not in the ways their world valued. I began to see Aaron's true nature in small moments. While other children his age might struggle with basic math, he could calculate tips and tacks in his head faster than adults with calculators. He memorized entire books after hearing them once, not just the words, but the rhythms and emotions behind them. His drawings weren't childish scribbles, but detailed architectural plans, complete with measurements and structural elements that would have impressed engineering students. But when it came to standardized tests, to sitting still in rigid classroom settings, to regurgitating information in the exact format teachers expected, he failed miserably. And each failure reinforced his parents' growing belief that something was fundamentally wrong with their investment in his future. I started keeping a journal during those early months, not because I planned to, but because I needed somewhere to put all the moments that mattered. November 15th. Aaron explained to me why birds fly in formation, complete with aerodynamic principles he'd somehow intuited. November 22nd. He built a working model of the solar system using kitchen supplies, with orbital periods that were mathematically accurate. December 3rd. He cried himself to sleep after bringing home another failed math test, asking me why he was too stupid to make Daddy proud. That night, after tucking Aaron into bed and singing him the lullaby about the mockingbird that always calmed him down, I made a decision that would change everything. I knocked on Richard's study door, something I'd never done before. The nanny was supposed to communicate with Eleanor about household matters, not disturb the master of the house during his nightly ritual of checking Asian market reports. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his multiple computer screens displaying stock charts and cryptocurrency values. The room smelled of expensive leather and the faint traces of his cologne, all masculine authority and financial power. "Mr. Whitman, I need to talk to you about Aaron." He glanced up then, and I saw irritation flicker across his features. Richard was a handsome man in his early 40s, the kind of polished success that looked good in business magazines, but there was something cold in his gray eyes, something that calculated value in everything, even conversations. "If this is about his grades again, I'm aware. We're looking into military school options." "Sir, with respect, Aaron isn't failing because he's not intelligent. He's failing because he learns differently than the system expects." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same expression he probably used to evaluate stock portfolios. "Margaret, I appreciate your dedication to Aaron, but the boy has had every advantage: the best schools, private tutors, educational resources that cost more than most people's annual salaries. If he can't succeed with those investments, perhaps it's time to accept that not every child is destined for academic achievement." I felt something hot and protective rise in my chest. The same feeling I'd had years ago when defending my own children from playground bullies. "Mr. Whitman, your son can tell you the architectural principles behind the Brooklyn Bridge, but he can't sit still for a spelling test because his mind works too fast for the format. He understands mathematical concepts that wouldn't be taught until high school, but he fails basic arithmetic because he sees patterns the teachers don't recognize." That's not how the world works, Margaret. Success requires conformity, discipline, the ability to perform within established parameters. I didn't build this fortune by thinking differently. I built it by understanding exactly how systems work and excelling within them. I stood there in that mahogany-paneled study, surrounded by the evidence of his financial success, awards from investment firms, photos with politicians and celebrities, a small statue made of actual gold that some cryptocurrency company had given him for being an early adopter. And I realized we were speaking completely different languages. He measured worth in dollars and performance metrics. I measured it in the light that came into Aaron's eyes when he finally understood he wasn't broken. "Give me 6 months," I said. "Let me work with him my way. If his grades don't improve, if he doesn't start showing progress in school, then you can consider other options." Richard studied me for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the leather arm of his chair. Behind him, his computer screens continued their endless dance of numbers, profits, and losses, shifting by the second in markets around the world. "Fine," he said finally. 6 months. "But Margaret, I'm not investing unlimited time and resources in false hope. If Aaron can't learn to function in normal educational settings, we need to accept that and plan accordingly." I left that study with my heart hammering against my ribs, knowing I'd just made a promise that could change a little boy's entire future. But as I walked past Aaron's room and heard him talking softly to his stuffed elephant, not baby talk, but a detailed explanation of why elephants have such good memories, I knew I was right. The brilliance was there. It just needed someone to see it. The next morning, I started really observing Aaron, not just caring for him, but studying how his mind worked. I discovered that he couldn't focus during traditional lessons, but could concentrate for hours when he was interested in something. He couldn't memorize spelling words from a list, but could remember every detail of stories I told him. He struggled with basic math worksheets, but could calculate complex problems if they were connected to something real, like figuring out how many Lego pieces he'd need to build a scale model of the Empire State Building. I began designing what I called stealth learning, educational activities disguised as play. We cooked together, and he mastered fractions by measuring ingredients. We took walks through Central Park, and he learned about ecosystems and biology by observing squirrel behavior. We visited the Museum of Natural History, and he absorbed more information about geology and paleontology in one afternoon than most kids learn in a semester. But the most important thing I learned about Aaron was that he desperately wanted to make his father proud. Every small success he achieved, his first question was always the same: "Do you think Daddy will be happy?" It broke my heart because Richard was usually too busy managing his investment portfolio to notice his son's breakthroughs. December became a month of small miracles. Aaron's reading comprehension scores jumped 2 grade levels. His math started clicking when I showed him how algebra was like solving puzzles. His behavior in school improved because he was finally understanding material that had seemed impossible before. But Richard remained focused on quarterly reports and cryptocurrency fluctuations, barely glancing up when Eleanor mentioned that Aaron's teachers had noted improvement. Christmas morning revealed the stark difference between how the Whitmans and I saw Aaron. Richard gave him an expensive tablet loaded with educational software, the kind of gift that looked generous but felt like homework. Eleanor presented him with designer clothes that were more about maintaining the family image than considering what an 8-year-old might actually want to wear. I had crocheted him a simple blanket, nothing fancy or expensive, just soft blue yarn worked into a pattern of stars. When Aaron opened it, his face lit up in a way that expensive electronics couldn't achieve. "You made this for me?" he asked, running his small fingers over the stitches. "Just for me?" "Just for you," I confirmed, and watched him wrap it around his shoulders like a superhero cape. That afternoon, while Richard was on a conference call about Asian market opportunities and Eleanor was hosting a holiday cocktail party for her charity board friends, Aaron and I sat together in the kitchen sharing hot chocolate and reading one of his favorite books. He was curled against my side, that blue blanket still wrapped around him, when he looked up at me with those serious, dark eyes. "Margaret," he said quietly, "are you my real mom?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I thought about my own children, grown now and living their own lives, how I'd missed so many moments with them because I'd been caring for other people's babies. I thought about all the nights I'd rocked Aaron to sleep, all the tears I'd dried, all the small triumphs I'd celebrated with him while his parents were occupied with more important things. "No, sweetheart," I said, my voice barely steady. "Your mama is Eleanor, but I love you just as much as if you were mine." "I wish you were," he whispered, and I had to close my eyes to keep from crying. That night, after Aaron was asleep and the house had settled into its expensive quiet, I sat in my small room and wrote in my journal about the loneliness of loving someone else's child completely, while knowing you'll never truly belong to their family. The Whitmans paid me well, provided me with comfortable living quarters, treated me with polite respect, but I would always be the help, never the heart. January brought a breakthrough that changed everything. Aaron had been struggling with a science project about solar energy, the kind of assignment that sounded simple but required research skills and presentation abilities that challenged most third graders. After school one Friday, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a blank poster board with tears of frustration in his eyes. "I don't understand any of this," he said. "Everyone else already started their projects, but I can't even figure out where to begin." "Let's think about it differently," I suggested, sitting beside him. "Instead of reading about solar energy, what if we built something that uses it?" His eyes widened with interest. "We can do that?" "We can try. What do you know about the sun?" For the next 3 hours, Aaron and I worked together creating a simple solar oven, using a pizza box, aluminum foil, and black paper. As we worked, he absorbed principles of thermodynamics, reflection and energy conversion, without realizing he was learning advanced scientific concepts. By the end of the afternoon, we were using our homemade device to melt chocolate and make s'mores, while Aaron explained to me exactly how the sun's energy was being trapped and converted to heat. Monday morning, while other students presented traditional poster board projects copied from internet sources, Aaron wheeled in his solar oven and demonstrated how renewable energy could be harnessed for practical purposes. He explained the scientific principles with an enthusiasm and understanding that amazed his teacher and classmates. For the first time in his academic career, Aaron received not just a passing grade, but recognition for excellence. When he came home that afternoon, practically bouncing with excitement, the first thing he wanted was to show his father. We found Richard in his study, as usual, but this time Aaron's enthusiasm was too big to be ignored. "Daddy, look what Margaret and I made. It's a solar oven, and it can cook food using just sunlight. And I know how it works, and Mrs. Patterson said it was the best project she'd ever seen from a third grader, and she wants me to show it to the other classes, and—" "Slow down, Aaron," Richard said, but he was smiling as he said it, the first genuine smile I'd seen him give his son. "Show me this amazing invention." For 20 minutes, Aaron demonstrated his project with the passion of a scientist presenting groundbreaking research. He explained how solar panels worked, why certain materials absorbed heat more efficiently than others, how the angle of the sun affected energy collection. Richard listened with growing amazement, asking questions that Aaron answered with confidence and precision. "This is impressive," Richard finally said, and I saw something shift in his expression as he looked at his son. "You really understand all of this?" "Margaret taught me, but I figured out some parts myself," Aaron said proudly. "Did you know that if we put solar panels on our roof, we could probably generate enough electricity to power the whole house? I calculated it based on our square footage and average sunlight exposure." Richard turned to look at me then. Really look at me, perhaps for the first time since I'd been hired. "You taught him this?" "I helped him discover what he was already capable of learning," I replied carefully. "Aaron has always been brilliant, Mr. Whitman. He just learns differently than traditional educational methods expect." That night, after Aaron was asleep, Richard knocked on my door. I'd been sitting by my small window working on another blanket for Aaron, this one with a pattern of planets and stars, when I heard his soft tap. "Margaret, do you have a moment?" I set down my crochet hook and followed him to the living room, where he stood by the wall of windows overlooking the city lights. Even at home, he looked like a successful businessman, his casual clothes expensive and perfectly fitted, his graying hair styled in a way that conveyed authority and wealth. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "I've been watching Aaron these past few weeks, really watching him, and I'm beginning to see what you've been trying to tell me. He is brilliant, isn't he?" "Yes, sir." "He is. I've been so focused on his failures that I missed his potential. In my business, when an investment isn't performing, you either fix the strategy or cut your losses. I was ready to cut my losses with Aaron's education, but you saw something else." I chose my words carefully. "Aaron isn't an investment, Mr. Whitman. He's a little boy with an extraordinary mind who just needed someone to believe in him." Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city where he'd built his fortune through strategic thinking and calculated risks. "I want to do better by him," he said finally. "By both of you. You've given Aaron something I couldn't. You've given him confidence in his own intelligence." "He wants to make you proud," I told him. "That's all he's ever wanted." "He does make me proud, I'm not very good at showing it." February and March brought a transformation in our household that felt like watching spring arrive after a particularly brutal winter. Richard began eating breakfast with Aaron, asking about school projects, and actually listening to the answers. He started coming home earlier, making time to review homework, and genuinely engaging with his son's learning process. Eleanor noticed the change, too, though her response was more complicated. She was pleased that Aaron was performing better academically, grateful that the parent-teacher conferences were no longer exercises in diplomatic disappointment. But I sensed some resentment, too, a recognition that the improvement had come not through her efforts or expensive educational consultants, but through the quiet work of the hired help she'd barely noticed. Aaron bloomed under his father's newfound attention, like a plant finally receiving adequate sunlight. His grades continued to improve, but more importantly, his confidence grew. He started raising his hand in class, volunteering for presentations, engaging with schoolwork as something interesting rather than an insurmountable challenge. In April, Aaron's school held its annual science fair, and Aaron begged to be allowed to participate. His project was ambitious, a working model of a smart home system that used sensors and programming to optimize energy efficiency. For 3 weeks, our kitchen table became his laboratory as we worked together, researching, building, testing, and refining his design. Richard surprised us both by taking an active interest in the project. He would come home from managing his multi-million-dollar investment portfolio and sit at the kitchen table helping his 8-year-old son troubleshoot programming code. Watching them work together, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any paycheck could provide. This was what I'd been fighting for, not just Aaron's academic success, but the connection between father and son that had been missing for so long. The night before the science fair, Aaron couldn't sleep. I found him in his room at 11 o'clock, staring at the ceiling with worried eyes. "What if it doesn't work tomorrow?" he asked. "What if I forget how to explain it? What if the judges think it's stupid?" I sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his dark hair away from his forehead the way I'd done countless nights before. "Aaron, do you remember when we first started working together, how frustrated you used to get when you couldn't understand your homework?" He nodded. "You've come so far since then, not because you weren't smart before, but because you learned to trust yourself. Tomorrow, just remember that you understand your project better than anyone else there. You built it, you know how it works, and you should be proud of what you've accomplished. Will you be there tomorrow?" "I wouldn't miss it for anything," I promised. The science fair was held in the school gymnasium, transformed for the day into a showcase of student innovation. Aaron's project was set up between a volcano that erupted baking soda lava and a display about plant growth, his sophisticated smart home system looking almost professorial in comparison to typical elementary school efforts. I watched from the back of the room as judges moved from table to table, evaluating projects and interviewing students. When they reached Aaron's station, I held my breath. But I needn't have worried. Aaron explained his project with the confidence of someone who truly understood his subject, fielding questions about programming languages and energy efficiency with the kind of expertise that impressed adults. Richard had managed to clear his schedule to attend, standing proudly beside Eleanor as their son demonstrated capabilities they were still learning to recognize. When Aaron won first place in the elementary division, Richard's smile was brighter than I'd ever seen it. That evening, we celebrated with Aaron's favorite dinner, homemade pizza that we prepared together, letting him choose all the toppings and helping him roll out the dough. As we ate, Richard made a speech that brought tears to my eyes. "Aaron, I want to apologize for not seeing your brilliance sooner. You have an extraordinary mind, and I'm proud of the young man you're becoming. And Margaret," he turned to me, "thank you for believing in him when I didn't know how to." It was a perfect moment, the kind that makes all the difficult times worthwhile. But I'd learned from 43 years of caring for other people's children that perfect moments in borrowed families are often followed by painful reminders of your temporary place in their lives. The reminder came in May, wrapped in designer clothing and speaking with a refined British accent. Vivian Crawford Smythe was Eleanor's newly divorced socialite friend, recently relocated to Manhattan with her own 8-year-old daughter and a desperate need to establish herself in New York high society. She was elegant in that expensive way that money can buy, with perfectly styled silver hair and clothes that whispered their designer origins. Eleanor invited Vivian for lunch one afternoon while I was helping Aaron with a book report in the kitchen. I couldn't help overhearing their conversation as it drifted through the house, particularly when the topic turned to household management. "Eleanor, darling, you must tell me your secret," Vivian was saying. "Aaron has transformed so remarkably this year. When we had lunch last fall, you were at your wits' end about his academic struggles, and now he's winning science fairs. What changed?" "Oh, it's been remarkable," Eleanor replied, and I could hear the social smile in her voice. "We found this wonderful new tutoring program, very exclusive, terribly expensive, but worth every penny. And of course, Richard has been taking a much more active role in Aaron's education." I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I listened to this revisionist history. In Eleanor's version, my 6 months of patient work, of discovering Aaron's learning style, of building his confidence from the ground up, had been reduced to an expensive tutoring program that didn't exist. "How marvelous," Vivian cooed. "You know, I've been struggling with finding the right support for Isabella. The British system is so different, and these American schools have such peculiar expectations. I don't suppose you might recommend your tutoring program." "Well," Eleanor said, and I heard the hesitation in her voice. "It's not exactly a program per se. We have a nanny who's been quite helpful with Aaron's schoolwork." "A nanny? How delightfully practical. Is she available for additional children? I would pay handsomely for someone who could work the same magic with Isabella." I continued helping Aaron with his book report, but my hands were trembling slightly as I turned the pages. This was how it always went in wealthy households. The hired help did the work, but the family took the credit, reducing your efforts to happy accidents or natural developments. "McGarrett, are you okay?" Aaron asked, his 8-year-old intuition picking up on my distress. "You look sad." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I lied, forcing a smile. "Tell me more about this character you're analyzing." But I wasn't fine. And over the next few weeks, Vivian's presence in our household became increasingly intrusive. She would drop by unannounced, bringing Isabella for play dates that were actually auditions for my potential services. She would watch me work with Aaron, taking notes literally and figuratively, asking pointed questions about my methods. "Margaret, isn't it?" she said one afternoon, cornering me while Aaron and Isabella played in the garden. "Eleanor tells me you've worked miracles with young Aaron. I'm quite impressed with what I've observed." "Thank you, Mrs. Crawford Smythe." "Vivian, please. Now, I find myself in need of similar services for Isabella. She's a bright girl, of course, but she's struggling with the adjustment to American schools. I would be willing to pay substantially more than your current salary for someone with your particular talents." I felt trapped between politeness and growing unease. "I'm very happy in my current position, ma'am." "Oh, I'm sure you are. But Eleanor and I have been discussing the situation, and we think there might be an arrangement that benefits everyone. You see, Isabella needs more intensive support than Aaron does now that he's on the right track. And frankly, Aaron is getting to an age where he might benefit from more independence. Don't you think?" The implication was clear, though wrapped in the kind of diplomatic language wealthy women use to avoid direct confrontation. I was being phased out of Aaron's life, my services transferred to a new family who needed me more and would pay better for the privilege. That night, I lay in my small room staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar ache of loving someone else's child too much. This was the inevitable endpoint of every nanny position, the moment when your success makes you expendable, when helping a child grow means growing yourself out of a job. But this time felt different, more painful, because Aaron wasn't just any child. He had become, in every way that mattered except biology, my son. I had guided him through his darkest academic struggles, celebrated his breakthroughs, built the foundation of confidence that was now allowing him to flourish. The thought of leaving him felt like abandoning a piece of my own heart. June arrived with the kind of heat that makes Manhattan summers test the patience of even long-time residents. Aaron's school year was ending triumphantly. Honor roll grades, teacher recommendations, a general recognition that he had transformed from a struggling student into a gifted one. But the household atmosphere had grown tense with unspoken negotiations between Eleanor and Vivian about my future employment. Richard seemed oblivious to the brewing changes, focused as he was on a major cryptocurrency investment that required his constant attention. The digital currency markets never slept, and neither, it seemed, did his phone calls to international exchanges and his monitoring of blockchain transactions that represented millions of dollars in family wealth. It was Aaron who finally brought the situation to a head with the innocent directness that only children possess. "Margaret," he said one afternoon as we worked together on his summer reading list, "Isabella's mommy asked me if I would miss you when you come to live with them. What did she mean?" My heart stopped. "She asked you that?" "She said you were such a good teacher that you might help Isabella with school next year instead of helping me. But I told her you couldn't do that because you're my Margaret and I need you." I set down the book we'd been reading and pulled Aaron close, feeling his small body curl against mine with complete trust. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that love doesn't guarantee permanence, that the adult world operates on contracts and financial arrangements rather than emotional bonds? Aaron, sometimes grown-ups make decisions that are hard to understand, but no matter what happens, I will always care about you, and I will always be proud of how smart and wonderful you are. You're not leaving, are you? His voice was small and frightened, carrying echoes of every abandonment anxiety that had shaped his early childhood. I don't want to leave, I said honestly. You are one of the most important people in my life. That evening, I requested a meeting with both Richard and Eleanor. I found them in the living room after Aaron's bedtime, Eleanor reviewing charity event plans while Richard analyzed investment reports on his tablet. I need to understand my employment situation, I said without preamble. Mrs. Crawford Smythe has been discussing the possibility of my transferring to work with her daughter, and I want to know if this is something you're considering. Eleanor looked uncomfortable, setting down her papers with the careful precision of someone buying time to formulate a diplomatic response. Margaret, you've done wonderful work with Aaron this year, truly exceptional. But Vivian has pointed out that Aaron is becoming more independent, more confident in school. It might be natural for him to need less intensive support at this stage. And Isabella could benefit tremendously from your expertise, Richard added, though he didn't look up from his tablet. Vivian is prepared to offer you a substantial increase in salary, plus benefits that we frankly can't match. It might be a wonderful opportunity for advancement. I felt something break inside me, a careful construction of professional detachment that had protected me through decades of temporary attachments. Mr. Whitman, Mrs. Whitman, with respect, Aaron didn't transform this year because he outgrew his problems. He succeeded because someone finally understood how his mind works and helped him build confidence in his abilities. That foundation needs continued support, especially as academic demands increase. But surely any qualified caregiver could maintain the progress you've established, Eleanor said. You've set such a wonderful foundation. Building and maintaining are completely different skills, I replied. Aaron trusts me. He's comfortable sharing his struggles with me because we've worked through difficult times together. Starting over with a new person, especially during a crucial developmental period, could undermine everything we've accomplished. Richard finally looked up from his investment reports, his gray eyes calculating. Margaret, I appreciate your concern for Aaron, but sentiment can't override practical considerations. Vivian is offering you 30% more than we're currently paying, plus health benefits and a retirement contribution that would significantly improve your financial security. At your age, those considerations should weigh heavily in your decision-making process. At my age. The phrase hit like a slap, a reminder that I was 58 years old with no family wealth, no Bitcoin investments, no stock portfolio to guarantee my future security. Richard was right. Practically speaking, Vivian's offer was financially superior, and practical women in my position should prioritize long-term stability over emotional attachments. But practical women in my position also understood something that wealthy employers often missed. That children aren't investments to be optimized, but human beings who need consistency and love to thrive. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course, Eleanor replied with relief. Take all the time you need. There's no rush. But there was a rush, I realized. Summer was ending. School would start in 6 weeks, and arrangements needed to be made. If I was leaving Aaron's life, it would happen soon, whether I was ready or not. That night, I sat in my room surrounded by mementos of Aaron's progress, artwork he'd made for me, photos from school events, the blue blanket he'd outgrown but still sometimes wrapped around himself when he was tired. On my desk was the journal I'd kept throughout our time together, hundreds of pages documenting his struggles and triumphs, his growth from a confused and frustrated child to a confident young student. I thought about my own children, grown now and living across the country, building their own lives with families I saw only during brief holiday visits. I thought about the 43 years I'd spent caring for other people's babies, watching them take first steps and speak first words, and grow into people who eventually outgrew their need for me. But Aaron was different. Aaron wasn't just another temporary assignment. Aaron was the child of my heart, the boy whose brilliance I'd recognized when his own parents couldn't see it. Leaving him felt like betraying everything I'd ever believed about love and loyalty and the sacred trust between caregiver and child. Yet staying meant accepting less money, fewer benefits, and the growing reality that Eleanor and Richard saw my value primarily in terms of Aaron's academic performance rather than the deeper emotional work I'd been doing. For 3 days, I wrestled with the decision while maintaining my normal routines with Aaron, helping him read, working on math concepts, answering the endless questions that bubbled up from his curious mind. He sensed my distraction but didn't press, though I caught him watching me with worried eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. The decision was made for me on a Thursday morning in July, in the most painful way possible. I woke early, as always, and went to the kitchen to prepare Aaron's breakfast. The house was quiet, the kind of expensive silence that money could buy through good insulation and distance from city neighbors. I was measuring coffee when I heard voices from Richard's study, not unusual since he often took calls with European markets during early morning hours. But these weren't business voices. I recognized Eleanor's laugh, and underneath it, Vivian's refined British accent. My stomach clenched with intuition as I moved closer to the study, not to eavesdrop, but to understand why they were meeting so early and speaking in such hushed tones. "Perfect timing, really," Eleanor was saying. "Margaret has been wonderful for Aaron, but you're absolutely right that he's outgrown intensive support. And frankly, having her transfer to Isabella gives us the opportunity to try something different with Aaron." "Different how?" Vivian asked. "Well, Richard has been saying that Aaron needs to develop more independence, more resilience. Having less hands-on help might actually benefit his character development. And of course, it would reduce our household expenses significantly." "Quite sensible," Vivian agreed. "And Margaret's methods are exactly what Isabella needs. The poor child has been struggling so terribly with the transition. When can we make the transfer official?" "Richard thinks we should wait until after Aaron's birthday next month," Eleanor replied. "Give him one last celebration with Margaret, then make the change before school starts. Clean break, fresh start." I stood frozen in the hallway, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. They were discussing my life, Aaron's emotional well-being, and our relationship like a business transaction. Aaron's 9th birthday was in 3 weeks. They planned to let me help him celebrate, then fire me immediately afterward as some kind of gift-wrapped goodbye. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just the firing itself, but the calculated timing, waiting until after I'd helped make Aaron's birthday special, then cutting me loose before I could object or fight for my position, using my love for Aaron as an unpaid service right up until the moment they discarded me. I backed away from the study and somehow made it to my room before the tears started. 43 years of caring for other people's children, and it always ended the same way. With my services no longer required, my emotional investment treated as a job benefit rather than genuine love. But this time was worse because Aaron wasn't just any child. Aaron was the boy I'd fought for, believed in, helped transform from a struggling student into a confident young scholar. Aaron was the child who'd asked if I was his real mother, who called me his Margaret, who trusted me with his fears and shared his triumphs with infectious joy. And they were going to take him away from me like I was a defective appliance, being replaced with a newer model. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to compose myself before going downstairs to make Aaron's breakfast. He was waiting in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, dark hair sticking up in cowlicks that made him look younger than his 8 years. "Morning, Margaret," he said cheerfully, then stopped and studied my face with that intuitive awareness he'd always possessed. "Are you sick? Your eyes look funny." "Just tired, sweetheart," I lied, ruffling his hair. "What would you like for breakfast?" "Can we make pancakes? The ones with the faces?" "Of course we can." As I mixed batter and heated the griddle, Aaron chattered about his plans for the day: a play date with a school friend, a trip to the Natural History Museum with Eleanor, a new book he wanted to start reading. His enthusiasm was infectious despite my heartbreak, and I found myself smiling at his excitement about the fossil exhibit he wanted to visit. This was what I would miss most, I realized. Not the successful academic moments or the proud parent conferences, but these simple morning conversations, the easy intimacy of shared routines, the privilege of watching his mind work through ideas and possibilities. "Margaret," Aaron said, as I poured batter into face shapes on the griddle, "will you always be my nanny?" The question hit like a knife to the heart, so perfectly timed with my morning's discovery that I wondered if children possess some mystical awareness of impending changes in their lives. "What made you think about that?" I asked carefully. "Isabella's mommy keeps asking me questions about you, and yesterday I heard mommy tell daddy that I'm getting more mature. It made me worry that maybe you might not want to take care of me anymore if I'm too grown up." I knelt down beside his chair so we were eye to eye, this beautiful boy who'd become the center of my world without either of us planning it. "Aaron, listen to me very carefully. You are not too grown up, and I will always want to be part of your life. Being mature doesn't mean you stop needing people who care about you. It means you get better at understanding how much those relationships matter." "So you're not leaving?" I looked into his trusting eyes and felt my heart break completely. In 3 weeks after his birthday celebration, I would be gone from his daily life forever. But I couldn't tell him that, couldn't burden him with adult decisions and financial arrangements that he was too young to understand. "I love you, Aaron," I said instead. "That will never change, no matter what happens." He seemed satisfied with this non-answer, wrapping his arms around my neck in one of those spontaneous hugs that made everything else fade away. I held him close, memorizing the feel of his small body, the scent of his shampoo, the way he hummed slightly when he was content. The next 3 weeks were the most bittersweet of my life. Knowing I was secretly living on borrowed time with Aaron made every moment precious and painful simultaneously. I found myself paying attention to details I'd previously taken for granted: the way he twisted his hair when concentrating, his habit of talking to himself while working out problems, the questions he asked that revealed the sophisticated thinking hiding behind his young face. Eleanor and Vivian continued their planning, speaking in the coded language wealthy women used when discussing household staff changes. Vivian began stopping by more frequently, ostensibly for social visits, but actually to observe my methods and prepare for the transition. She would watch me help Aaron with reading comprehension or work through math problems, taking mental notes about techniques she could relay to whoever would replace me in Aaron's life. Richard remained focused on his business interests, apparently content to let Eleanor handle the domestic arrangements while he managed the family's growing portfolio. Bitcoin had surged again, adding millions to their already substantial wealth. And he spent hours analyzing market trends and cryptocurrency fluctuations that moved faster than traditional investments. Aaron seemed to sense something was different, though he couldn't identify what had changed. He became more clingy, asking for extra bedtime stories and requesting my presence during activities he'd previously handled independently. Children possess exquisite emotional antennae, picking up on adult tensions even when they can't interpret the signals correctly. "Margaret," he said one evening as I tucked him into bed, "are you worried about something? You seem sad lately." "I'm not sad when I'm with you," I replied honestly. "You make me happy, Aaron. Always remember that." "You make me happy, too," he said sleepily. "I hope we can be together for always and always." "Always and always," I repeated, though the words felt like gravel in my throat. Aaron's birthday planning became a particularly cruel form of torture. Eleanor wanted to throw an elaborate party with professional entertainment and expensive catering. the kind of celebration that looked impressive in social media photos but had little to do with what Aaron actually enjoyed. "What about a smaller party?" I suggested during one planning meeting. Aaron mentioned wanting to invite just a few close friends to work on science projects together. He's been excited about showing them his solar oven design. "Oh, Margaret," Eleanor laughed. "That's so sweet. But children Aaron's age need more excitement than science experiments. We've hired a magician and arranged for a bounce house in the garden. Much more appropriate for a proper birthday celebration." "Of course," I said quietly, understanding that this was another reminder of my place in the household hierarchy. The hired help doesn't make decisions about family celebrations, even when she knows the child better than anyone else in the room. But Aaron surprised everyone 2 days before his birthday by having what Eleanor described as a complete meltdown about the party plans. He didn't want elaborate entertainment or dozens of guests he barely knew. He wanted what he'd originally requested, a small gathering with close friends, focused on the science activities he genuinely enjoyed. "I don't understand why he's being so difficult," Eleanor complained to me privately. "We're giving him everything a child could want for his birthday." "You're giving him everything you think he should want," I replied gently. "But Aaron has never been interested in typical childhood activities. His idea of fun involves learning and discovery, not bounce houses and magic shows." "Well, it's too late to change everything now. He'll have to learn to appreciate the effort we've made." But Aaron continued to resist, retreating into quiet sadness rather than excitement as his birthday approached. The night before the celebration, I found him in his room staring out the window with the kind of resignation I'd seen during his worst academic struggles. "Talk to me, sweetheart," I said, sitting beside him on his bed. "Tell me what you're thinking about." "Why don't they listen to me?" he asked. "I tried to tell Mommy what I wanted for my birthday, but she said my ideas weren't fun enough, but they would be fun for me. Why doesn't that matter?" It was a question I couldn't answer honestly without criticizing his parents, so I chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults think they know what's best for children without really understanding what would make those children happiest. It doesn't mean they don't love you, it just means they're not very good listeners. "You listen to me." "I try to," I said. "What you think and feel is important to me." "Margaret," Aaron said quietly, "can I tell you a secret? I don't want a big party with lots of people I don't know. I just want to spend my birthday with you and Daddy and Mommy, maybe make a cake together and read stories and do puzzles. That would be the best birthday ever." My heart broke all over again, knowing that this gentle, thoughtful child would never get the birthday he actually wanted, and worse, that this would be our last birthday together regardless of how it was celebrated. "That sounds like a perfect birthday to me," I told him. "Maybe next year," he said hopefully. Next year, when I would be gone from his life, caring for Isabella Crawford Smythe and helping another child navigate academic challenges while Aaron faced middle school transitions without the support system we'd built together. Aaron's birthday party unfolded exactly as Eleanor had planned. Elaborate, expensive, and completely wrong for the birthday boy. Professional entertainers performed for disinterested 8-year-olds while Aaron watched from the sidelines, politely thanking guests for gifts he didn't want, and participating in activities that held no appeal for his curious, scientifically oriented mind. I documented everything with the camera Eleanor had given me, taking photos of Aaron blowing out candles on a cake decorated with superheroes he'd never shown interest in, opening presents selected more for their price tags than their relevance to his actual interests. But there was one moment that made the day worthwhile. During a quiet break between scheduled activities, Aaron found me in the kitchen where I was helping organize the catering service. "Margaret," he said, tugging on my hand, "come see what I made for you." He led me to his room where he'd been working secretly on a birthday gift, for me, on his birthday. It was a hand-drawn book titled Margaret and Aaron's Adventures, filled with illustrations and stories about all our learning experiences together, The solar oven project, our museum visits, cooking experiments, nature walks through Central Park, every significant moment from our time together, documented with the careful attention to detail that characterized everything Aaron created. "This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me," I said, tears threatening to overflow as I turned through pages of memories he'd preserved in crayon and colored pencil. "I wanted to make sure we remembered everything," he said simply. Remembered. As if he somehow sensed that our time was ending, that memories would soon be all we had of this precious relationship. That night, after the guests had gone home and the elaborate party decorations had been cleaned away, I sat in my room holding Aaron's handmade book and making a decision that would change both our lives forever. I couldn't leave him. Not like this. Not when he needed stability and continuity more than ever as he approached the challenging middle school years. Not when Eleanor and Richard were preparing to abandon the very support system that had transformed their son from a struggling student into a confident young scholar. I would refuse Vivian's offer. I would fight for my position in Aaron's life, even if it meant sacrificing financial gain and job security. Some things were more important than money, and Aaron's well-being was worth any personal cost. The next morning, I requested another meeting with Richard and Eleanor. They received me in the living room where Eleanor was reviewing thank you note templates for Aaron's birthday gifts while Richard monitored cryptocurrency markets on his tablet. "I need to discuss Mrs. Crawford Smythe's offer," I began without preamble. "Of course," Eleanor said with bright false cheer. "Vivian is so excited about the arrangement. She's prepared to increase her offer by another $5,000 annually. Plus, she's found a lovely apartment near the school Isabella will be attending. The transition should be quite smooth." "I want to decline her offer," I said clearly. "I'm choosing to remain with the Whitman family." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's smile froze in place while Richard looked up from his market analysis with obvious surprise. "Margaret," Eleanor said carefully, "I'm not sure you understand the full situation. This is an exceptional opportunity. More money, better benefits, a chance to start fresh with a family that truly needs your specific skills." "I understand the financial benefits," I replied, "but Aaron needs consistency and continuity as he grows up. We've built a foundation together that shouldn't be disrupted just because he's performing better academically." Richard set down his tablet and studied me with the same calculating expression he used for investment decisions. "Margaret, we appreciate your dedication to Aaron, but we've already made commitments to Vivian based on your acceptance of her position. This decision affects more people than just you." "Then unmake those commitments," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. "Tell Mrs. Crawford Smythe that I'm not available, and let her find someone else to help Isabella. Aaron was struggling when I arrived here, and he's thriving now because we work well together. Why would you want to disrupt that success?" Eleanor exchanged a look with Richard, one of those married couple communications that conveyed entire conversations without words. "Margaret," Eleanor said finally, "we weren't going to discuss this until after the transition, but perhaps it's better to be frank now. We've decided that Aaron needs to develop more independence as he approaches middle school. Having less intensive support might actually benefit his character development. And frankly," Richard added, "maintaining your full-time salary when Aaron requires less assistance isn't the most efficient use of household resources. We have other financial priorities, college funds to maximize, investment opportunities that require capital allocation." I felt the familiar sting of being reduced to a line item in someone else's budget, a household expense to be optimized rather than a person who devoted herself to their child's well-being. "Mr. Whitman, Mrs. Whitman," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I've spent 43 years working as a nanny, and I've learned that academic improvement isn't the same as emotional maturity. Aaron's grades have improved because someone finally understood how his mind works and helped him build confidence in his abilities. But he's still 8 years old. He still needs advocacy, support, and someone who believes in his potential unconditionally. And he'll have that, Eleanor said quickly. We're planning to hire a part-time tutor for specific subjects, and of course we'll continue to monitor his progress closely. A rotating series of tutors who don't know his learning style, don't understand his emotional needs, and have no investment in his long-term success, I countered. Aaron isn't a problem to be solved efficiently. He's a child who needs love and consistency to continue thriving. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but I could see that their decision was final. They had committed to transferring me to Vivian's household, and they weren't willing to reconsider based on my objections or Aaron's needs. As I left that meeting, I realized I had one more card to play, the truth about what their decision would cost Aaron emotionally. But playing that card would require breaking the professional distance I'd maintained throughout my career. Speaking as someone who loved Aaron rather than someone who was paid to care for him. That afternoon, while Eleanor was at a charity luncheon and Richard was in his study managing the family's expanding cryptocurrency portfolio, I found Aaron in the garden where he was building a fort out of fallen branches and garden twine. "Can I help?" I asked, settling beside him on the grass. "I'm making a secret hideout," he explained, expertly knotting twine around intersecting branches. "It's big enough for 2 people in case someone wants to hide with me." "It looks like an excellent hideout," I agreed, helping him position a branch that would form one wall. "Aaron, I need to tell you something important, and I need you to listen carefully." He stopped working and turned to face me with those serious, dark eyes that always seemed older than his years. "Remember when you asked if I was leaving, and I told you I loved you no matter what happened?" He nodded solemnly. "Well, sometimes adults make decisions that children don't understand, and those decisions can change things even when no one wants them to change. Your parents have decided that I should go work for Isabella's family instead of staying here with you." The color drained from Aaron's face as he processed this information. "You're leaving me?" "I don't want to leave you," I said quickly. "I've tried to explain to your parents that I think you still need me, but they believe you're ready to handle things on your own." "But I'm not ready," he whispered, and I saw tears beginning to form in his eyes. "I need you, Margaret. You're the only one who understands how my brain works. You're the only one who doesn't get mad when I can't do things the normal way." "I know, sweetheart, and you need to tell your parents exactly what you just told me. They need to hear from you how important our relationship is." "They won't listen," Aaron said with heartbreaking certainty. "They never listen when I try to tell them important things." "This time might be different," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. "This time, you need to be very clear about what you need and why it matters." That evening, Aaron asked to speak with both parents after dinner. Eleanor and Richard gathered in the living room with indulgent expressions, clearly expecting a typical childhood request that could be easily granted or gently refused. "Mommy, Daddy," Aaron began, his small voice trembling slightly with nervousness. "Margaret told me she has to go work for Isabella's family, but I don't want her to leave. I need her to stay with me." "Oh, sweetheart," Eleanor said with false brightness. "I know you're fond of Margaret, but you're getting to be such a big boy now. You don't really need a nanny anymore." "I do need her," Aaron insisted, his voice growing stronger. "She's the only one who knows how to help me when school is hard. She's the only one who understands that my brain works differently, and that's okay. If she leaves, I'll go back to failing tests and feeling stupid." Richard leaned forward slightly, his business-trained mind recognizing the logical structure of Aaron's argument, even if he didn't like its implications. "Aaron," he said carefully, "Margaret has taught you strategies for handling schoolwork. You can use those strategies even if she's not here to help every day. But what if I forget them? What if new problems come up that we haven't practiced yet? What if I start getting confused again and there's no one who knows how to help me figure it out?" These were legitimate concerns, I realized, listening from the kitchen where I was cleaning up after dinner. Aaron understood better than his parents did that academic confidence was fragile, that maintaining progress required ongoing support and advocacy. "Margaret loves me," Aaron continued, his voice breaking slightly. "She's proud of me when I do well. But she doesn't get disappointed when I make mistakes. She makes me feel smart even when I'm struggling. If she goes away, who's going to make me feel smart?" The question hung in the air like an indictment. Who indeed? Eleanor and Richard had good intentions, but they'd never learned to see Aaron's brilliance through his struggles. They measured success in grades and test scores, not in the incremental victories that built genuine confidence. "Aaron," Eleanor said gently, "we love you too. We're proud of you too. But you get frustrated with me when I can't do things right the first time," Aaron replied with devastating honesty. "You want me to be different than I am. Margaret likes me exactly the way I am." I closed my eyes. Listening to this 8-year-old child articulate the fundamental difference between conditional and unconditional love with more clarity than most adults ever achieve. The conversation continued for several more minutes, but I could tell from the tone that Aaron's plea wasn't changing his parents' decision. They were sympathetic to his upset, but unmoved by his arguments, treating his distress as temporary emotional resistance to beneficial change rather than legitimate fear about losing essential support. That night, Aaron cried himself to sleep despite my efforts to comfort him. I sat beside his bed, smoothing his hair and humming the lullabies that had always calmed him, feeling like I was failing him in the most fundamental way possible. 2 days later, Eleanor informed me that I had 1 week to complete the transition to Vivian's household. Aaron would spend that week at summer camp, she explained, to make the change easier for everyone involved. Easier for the adults, perhaps, but not easier for Aaron, who would return from camp to find that the person who'd anchored his world for the past year had vanished without a proper goodbye. I spent that week packing my belongings and trying to process the injustice of being torn away from a child who needed me to serve a family that simply wanted me. My small room filled with cardboard boxes containing the accumulated evidence of my year with Aaron, photos from school events, artwork he'd made, small gifts and cards that chronicled our relationship. At the bottom of my suitcase, I carefully wrapped Aaron's handmade book about our adventures together. Whatever happened next, I would always have those memories, those documented moments when a struggling child and a dedicated caregiver found each other and created something beautiful together. Vivian Crawford Smythe's apartment on the Upper West Side was elegant and expensive, decorated in the kind of refined English style that whispered old money and good breeding. Isabella was a lovely girl, bright and articulate, but struggling with the cultural transition from British to American educational expectations. In other circumstances, I might have enjoyed working with her, helping her navigate new social dynamics and academic requirements. But every moment in their beautiful apartment felt like betrayal. Every small success with Isabella, a reminder of the boy I'd been forced to abandon. "Margaret, you seem rather distracted," Vivian observed after my first week. "Is everything quite all right?" "I'm still adjusting to the change," I replied diplomatically. "Of course. It must have been difficult to leave the Whitman boy after working so closely with him, but Eleanor assures me he's doing splendidly on his own now. Children are remarkably resilient, aren't they?" Resilient. It was the word adults use to justify decisions that hurt children, as if the capacity to survive emotional trauma made inflicting it acceptable. 3 weeks into September, I received a phone call that shattered my carefully maintained professional composure. "Margaret." The voice was small and frightened, barely recognizable as Aaron's usual confident tone. "It's me. Aaron." "Aaron? Sweetheart, how did you get this number? Where are you?" I remembered where Mommy wrote down Isabella's mommy's phone number, and I found your name in the address book. "I'm at school, using the nurse's phone. Margaret, I need help." What's wrong? Are you hurt? I failed my first math test, he said, and I could hear him crying. The new tutor doesn't understand how I need to learn things, and the teacher is mad because she says I should know this stuff already. I tried to explain about the different ways my brain works, but nobody believes me anymore. My heart shattered. This was exactly what I'd feared would happen. Aaron's confidence crumbling without consistent support, his academic progress unraveling as new teachers and tutors failed to understand his learning style. Margaret, can you come back, please? I promise I'll be good, and I'll try harder, and I'll do whatever Mommy and Daddy want me to do. Oh, sweetheart, I said, tears streaming down my face. This isn't your fault. You don't need to be different or better than you already are. Then why did you leave me? The question pierced straight through my heart. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that sometimes loving someone isn't enough to stay in their life? How do you make a child understand adult decisions that prioritize money over emotional well-being? I didn't want to leave you, I said. I wanted to stay and keep helping you learn and grow. But sometimes grown-ups make decisions that children don't understand. Can't you come back now? Mommy and Daddy said you were happier with Isabella's family, but you don't sound happy. I wasn't happy. I was heartbroken and furious and filled with regret for allowing the Whitmans to manipulate me into betraying the child who needed me most. But admitting that to Aaron would only make his situation worse. Aaron, listen to me carefully. You are brilliant and wonderful exactly as you are. If your new tutor doesn't understand how you learn, that's her problem, not yours. If your teacher gets frustrated, that means she needs to learn better ways to teach, not that you need to be different. But what if I keep failing? What if everyone gives up on me again? I will never give up on you, I promised. Even if I can't be there every day, I will always believe in you and be proud of you. The school nurse came on the line then, explaining that Aaron needed to return to class, but that she was concerned about his distress level and thought his parents should be contacted. That afternoon, I called the Whitman house and asked to speak with Eleanor. She was polite but cool, clearly viewing my concern as overstepping appropriate boundaries. Margaret, while I appreciate your continued interest in Aaron's well-being, we need to allow him to adjust to his new situation without interference. The school counselor assures us that this is normal transition anxiety. Eleanor, Aaron called me in tears because he's failing math again. His confidence is disappearing exactly as I predicted it would. That's not normal transition anxiety. That's what happens when you remove essential support systems from a child who still needs them. Aaron is perfectly capable of handling age-appropriate academic challenges, Eleanor replied stiffly. Perhaps he was overly dependent on your assistance, and this experience will help him develop greater self-reliance. Or perhaps, I said, abandoning diplomacy completely, you've prioritized financial savings over your son's emotional well-being, and he's paying the price for your short-sighted decision. The conversation ended abruptly after that exchange, but I didn't care about maintaining professional relationships anymore. Aaron was suffering, and the adults responsible for his care were treating his distress as an acceptable cost of their financial planning. October brought more heartbreaking phone calls. Aaron continued to struggle academically, his test scores dropping to pre-intervention levels as teachers and tutors failed to accommodate his learning style. Worse, his confidence had evaporated, leaving him convinced once again that he was fundamentally defective rather than differently gifted. I think there's something wrong with my brain again, he told me during one clandestine call. Everyone keeps saying I should be able to do these things, but I can't remember how you taught me to figure them out. There's nothing wrong with your brain, I said firmly. Your brain works beautifully, but it works differently than traditional teaching methods expect. The problem isn't with you, Aaron. The problem is with people who don't understand how to help you succeed. But if I was really smart, like you said, wouldn't I be able to do well even without you? The question revealed the heart of his confusion. Aaron had internalized the belief that his previous success was due to his own intelligence, not understanding that even brilliant minds need appropriate support and teaching methods to flourish. Aaron, even the smartest adults need help and support to do their best work. Your daddy has assistants and advisors to help him make business decisions. Your mommy works with event planners and coordinators for her charity activities. Needing help doesn't mean you're not smart. It means you're human. These conversations became the highlight of my weeks. Brief windows into Aaron's world that left me simultaneously grateful for the connection and devastated by my inability to provide real assistance. Isabella was progressing nicely under my guidance, her British accent gradually acquiring American inflections as she adapted to her new environment. But every success with her felt hollow, a reminder of the child I'd been forbidden to help. In November, the situation reached a crisis point. Aaron's teacher requested a parent conference to discuss his declining performance and what she described as regressive behavior patterns. His grades had fallen to failing levels, his confidence had evaporated, and he'd begun exhibiting the same withdrawn, frustrated demeanor that had characterized his early struggles. Eleanor called me the day after that conference, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Aaron's teacher says he keeps talking about learning methods you used that helped him understand concepts better. She thinks it might be helpful if we could get some guidance about those techniques." "What kind of guidance are you looking for?" I asked carefully. "Well, perhaps you could write down some of the strategies you used, or maybe talk with his new tutor about approaches that worked particularly well, just to smooth his transition." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. They wanted my expertise without my presence, my knowledge without my emotional investment, my professional skills stripped of the relationship that had made them effective. "Eleanor," I said slowly, "the methods I used with Aaron weren't magic techniques that can be written down and implemented by strangers. They worked because I understood Aaron as an individual, because I'd observed him closely enough to recognize how his mind processed information, and because he trusted me enough to take risks and make mistakes without fear of judgment. But surely some of those approaches could be adapted, could they? Has the new tutor spent months watching Aaron work through problems, noting which explanations resonate with him and which leave him more confused? Has she learned to recognize the subtle signs that indicate when he's becoming frustrated versus when he's productively challenged? Does she understand that his apparent inattention often means he's processing complex ideas that need time to develop? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Margaret, what are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying that you can't separate teaching methods from teaching relationships. Aaron trusted me, so he was willing to struggle through difficult concepts because he knew I wouldn't give up on him. He felt safe making mistakes with me because he knew I saw his intelligence even when he couldn't demonstrate it conventionally. That trust and safety were the foundation that made the techniques effective." "Are you suggesting that we made a mistake in transitioning Aaron to more independent learning?" The question hung between us like a confession waiting to be spoken aloud. "Yes," I wanted to say. "You made a terrible mistake that's hurting your son and undermining everything we accomplished together." But Eleanor wasn't ready to hear that truth yet. "I'm suggesting that Aaron needed more time to internalize his new learning strategies before being expected to apply them independently. His academic confidence was still fragile, and removing support too quickly has caused exactly the kind of regression I was worried about." After that conversation, I waited for Eleanor or Richard to contact me about returning to work with Aaron, but the call never came. Instead, I learned through Isabella that the Whitmans had hired an expensive educational consultant to evaluate Aaron's learning needs and recommend intervention strategies. The irony was bitter, but unsurprising. They were willing to pay thousands of dollars to strangers rather than acknowledge that the solution to Aaron's problems was admitting they'd made an error in letting me go. Christmas approached with painful awareness that this would be the first holiday season in 2 years that I wouldn't spend with Aaron. Isabella and Vivian had graciously invited me to join their family celebrations, but accepting felt like betraying the boy who was probably spending the holiday wondering why I'd abandoned him. On Christmas Eve, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Margaret, it's Richard Whitman." My heart stopped. Richard never called me. Never had anything to do with household staff communications. If he was reaching out directly, something significant had happened. "Mr. Whitman, is Aaron all right?" "Aaron is... well, that's why I'm calling. We've just returned from a meeting with the educational consultant we hired to evaluate his learning challenges." I held my breath, waiting for him to continue. The consultant's report was quite comprehensive. She identified Aaron as a gifted child with specific learning differences that require individualized instruction and emotional support. She recommended maintaining consistent caregiving relationships to provide stability during the critical middle school transition years. "I see. Margaret, the consultant's recommendations are almost identical to the concerns you raised when we discussed transferring you to Vivian's household. It seems we may have been too hasty in making that change." Too hasty. Such careful language to describe a decision that had devastated his son and torn apart a relationship that had anchored Aaron's academic success. The consultant also noted that Aaron speaks frequently about learning methods you develop specifically for his needs, and that he seems to have lost confidence since transitioning to new support systems. "What are you asking me, Mr. Whitman?" "I'm asking if you would consider returning to work with Aaron. We realize now that we underestimated the importance of the relationship you'd built with him, and we'd like to correct that mistake if possible." I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of vindication and heartbreak. They were offering me exactly what I'd wanted for months, but only after Aaron had suffered through unnecessary academic failure and emotional distress to prove my point. "Mr. Whitman, what about Isabella? I have contractual obligations to the Crawford-Smythe family." "Vivian is disappointed, of course, but she understands that Aaron's needs are more urgent than Isabella's at this developmental stage. She's agreed to release you from your contract if you choose to return." "And what about the concerns you raised about efficiency and resource allocation? Has Aaron's age suddenly made him more deserving of support?" There was a pause, and when Richard spoke again, his voice carried a humility I'd never heard before. "Margaret, I owe you an apology. We treated your relationship with Aaron like a business transaction, when it was actually the foundation of his academic success. We prioritized financial considerations over his emotional well-being, and he's paid the price for our short-sightedness." It was the closest thing to genuine accountability I'd ever heard from Richard Whitman, and despite my anger about the months of unnecessary suffering, I felt a flicker of hope. What about Eleanor? Is she in agreement with this decision? Eleanor realizes that she was wrong about Aaron's readiness for independent learning. She's seen how much he's struggled without you, and she wants what's best for him. I thought about Aaron, probably spending Christmas vacation trying to catch up on failed assignments and dreading the return to school in January. I thought about the phone calls where he'd cried about feeling stupid again, about his teachers giving up on him, about desperately wanting to remember the learning strategies we'd developed together. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "Of course. But Margaret, I hope you'll consider it seriously. Aaron needs you, and frankly, we need you too. We didn't realize how much you contributed to our family's stability until you were gone." After hanging up, I sat in Vivian's elegant living room thinking about the strange turns my life had taken. 10 months ago, I'd been fighting to stay with Aaron, prepared to sacrifice financial gain to maintain our relationship. Now I was being asked to return, but the dynamics had shifted completely. The Whitmans needed me more than I needed them. Aaron's academic failure had exposed the inadequacy of their replacement plan, and their expensive educational consultant had validated everything I'd been trying to tell them for months. They were no longer offering me a job. They were begging me to solve a problem they'd created through their own poor judgment. But this wasn't about vindication or power dynamics. This was about a 9-year-old boy who'd trusted me completely, who'd built his academic confidence on the foundation of our relationship, who'd been abandoned just when he needed consistency most. On Christmas morning, I called the Whitman house and asked to speak with Aaron. "Margaret?" His voice was small and disbelieving, as if I might be a Christmas miracle too good to be real. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." "Merry Christmas. Are you coming home?" Home. He called it home. This place where I'd never truly belonged, but where I'd found the most important relationship of my life. "Would you like me to come home?" "More than anything," he whispered. "I miss you so much, and school is really hard again, and I keep trying to remember how you taught me to do things, but I can't make it work without you." "Aaron, listen to me. You remember more than you think you do. The problem isn't with your memory. The problem is that you need someone who understands your learning style to help you apply what you know." "So you'll come back? You'll help me again?" "Yes," I said, making the decision in that moment. "I'll come back." His squeal of joy carried through the phone like sunshine, and I felt my heart begin to heal from months of missing him. New Year's Day brought fresh snow and fresh beginnings as I returned to the Whitman mansion with my suitcases and my determination to rebuild what we'd lost. Aaron met me at the door with a tackle hug that nearly knocked me over. His 9-year-old body longer and leaner than I remembered, but his smile exactly as bright as I'd carried in my memory. "I knew you'd come back," he said, buried against my shoulder. "I knew you wouldn't leave me forever." Eleanor and Richard both apologized formally for their mistake, offering salary increases and benefit improvements that acknowledged my true value to their family. But the real apology came in their willingness to step back and let me rebuild Aaron's confidence without interference or second-guessing. The work was harder this time. Aaron's academic regression meant starting over with concepts he'd mastered months earlier, and his shattered confidence required careful reconstruction. But we had something now that we hadn't had before, the knowledge that we could overcome obstacles together, that our relationship was strong enough to survive even temporary separation. "Margaret," Aaron said one evening as we worked through math problems at the kitchen table, "I'm glad you came back, but I'm sorry you had to leave in the first place." "I'm sorry too, sweetheart. But maybe we both learned something important about how much we mean to each other." "I learned that you love me even when other people don't think I'm worth keeping," he said with devastating insight. "You are always worth keeping, Aaron. Always." By spring, Aaron's grades had not only recovered, but exceeded his previous achievements. More importantly, his confidence had returned stronger than before, tempered by the knowledge that he could survive setbacks and still succeed. His teachers began recommending him for advanced programs, recognizing the intellectual gifts that had always been there but had needed the right support to flourish. Richard started attending school events and parent conferences, engaging with Aaron's education in ways he'd never managed before. But the most meaningful change came in the small daily moments. Aaron no longer worried about being abandoned when he struggled with difficult concepts. He trusted that I would stay with him through challenges, that his worth wasn't conditional on perfect performance, that love could survive mistakes and setbacks. "Margaret," he said one afternoon as we celebrated his acceptance into the accelerated math program, "do you think other kids have troubles like I had?" "Yes, sweetheart, lots of children struggle in school because they learn differently than their teachers expect. Maybe when I grow up, I could help them the way you helped me." I looked at this remarkable boy, this child who'd transformed from a failing student to a confident scholar, not through magic or expensive interventions, but through the simple power of being understood and believed in. "I think you'd be wonderful at helping other children," I told him. "You understand what it feels like to be misunderstood, and that's the most important qualification for being helpful." Years have passed since then. Aaron is 16 now, preparing for college applications with grades and test scores that reflect his true intellectual abilities. He still comes to me when he faces new challenges, still values the problem-solving strategies we developed together, still treats me as the family member I became through love rather than biology. The Whitmans learned something important during our separation, that some relationships can't be replaced by more expensive alternatives, that emotional investments are often more valuable than financial ones, that love given freely is more powerful than service bought and paid for. But I learned something too. I learned that fighting for the children you love is always worth the risk, even when it means challenging powerful people and comfortable arrangements. I learned that my worth wasn't defined by my employer's recognition, but by my own knowledge of the difference I made in young lives. Most importantly, I learned that family isn't just about blood or legal documents or inheritance rights. Family is about showing up consistently, believing in each other unconditionally, and choosing love even when it's difficult or inconvenient. Aaron calls me his second mother now, introducing me to friends and teachers as the woman who helped him discover his own brilliance. The Whitmans include me in family photos and holiday celebrations, recognizing finally that I earned my place in their lives through dedication and love. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm helping Aaron with college application essays or discussing his dreams for the future, I remember that desperate little boy who once asked if I was his real mother, who cried himself to sleep wondering why he couldn't make his daddy proud. That boy became this confident young man through the simple power of being seen and understood and loved exactly as he was. Not because he changed to meet other people's expectations, but because someone finally recognized that his differences were strengths waiting to be discovered. Have you ever loved someone else's child as if they were your own? Have you fought to protect a relationship that mattered more than money or convenience or social expectations? Tell me your story in the comments. I believe every act of love toward a child creates ripples of hope that extend far beyond what we can see. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe so this message reaches another woman who may be caring for children with dedication and love, wondering if her efforts truly matter. They do matter. They matter more than she knows. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special podcast filled with stories just as moving. You can find it by clicking on the left. Thank you for walking this path of the heart with me. I'll see you in the next story.